the very end of the chapter 19, verses 30 through 38, and I'm not going to spend much time, but is there a person who would like to read chapter 19, verses 30 through 38? Okay, I will read it. Oh, okay, go ahead, Steve. It's Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 through 38. So, we have the end of the last set of consequences recorded in Genesis regarding Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's decision to live in Sodom. We see how immorality affects him and his family. First, it's clear from this that Lot is prone to alcoholism, and because of this, the evil that happens here is even possible. That's a way in which he is affected. Then, the fact that his firstborn would even think about this is only because of the environment that she grew up in, and convince the younger that it is a good idea. Both Lot's daughters were affected by the situation where they grew up in, and this decision to make sure they have sons seems perfectly fine to them and is obviously quite immoral. And it's a reminder that sin still has lingering effects. God has judged Sodom and Gomorrah, and God has delivered Lot and his family out of it, but you still have consequences as a result. The Moabites and the Ammonites come from this decision, and God does protect them. The Bible mentions later, particularly in Exodus and in Joshua, of God providing a place for them. So God does protect the Moabites and the Ammonites. They grew up to be a country, and they generally caused Israel no end of problems throughout the time of the kings. But all that to say, Lot's daughters were aware of things that they should not have known, and this seemed to them like a good idea, whereas it should not have been, and they make a decision that has far-reaching consequences. Any questions here? Yeah. Because he was the actual, that was his exact name, just as are often called the children of Israel rather than Israelites, or of Israel. That's what I think.
Okay. It's just interesting that the Moabites are always there, but children of Ammon, it's never, I don't know of any passage where it says Ammonites. It always says children of Ammon, which I thought was interesting.
That's right. Children of Ammon are people of Ammon, as they think about that in the Bible. And the name there is actually Ben-Ami, is son of my father. So it's a very, very literal name, and brings us to The end of chapter 19, we see God's judgment of sin, God's deliverance of Sodom in review. God's judgment of sin on Sodom, God's deliverance of Lot and his family from Sodom, and the way it affected his family directly. His 2 daughters, by Jewish tradition, however many daughters he had who were already married, they were lost. His wife was lost when she looked back toward Sodom. The idea is she looked back, she was strongly considering it. She's like, I want to be back there more. And she was overtaken in the judgment of the city. Lot had to flee with his daughters, and then his daughters make this decision here. All of that is caused directly and indirectly by Lot's decision to live in Sodom a long time ago. When he went to the field, the plain of the Jordan that was well watered everywhere, he didn't have to go and live in Sodom. He could have made all sorts of other decisions, lived in some other area, continued living in tents the same way Abraham did, and it would not have affected him to this degree. But he made continued decisions that brought more things upon his family. All that to say, though, God still delivered him. God is still faithful, even through sin. That brings us to the purposes of Genesis 20. And Genesis 20 is a short chapter, also a very good chapter, but I have plans that we will finish it today. Genesis 20 is in the Bible. It shows God's faithfulness again, God protecting both Abraham and Abimelech. He protects both Abraham and the king that Abraham has interaction with, protects both of them. And also, we see here God's positive aspects of judgment. Sodom and Gomorrah is God's negative aspect. He destroys sin. His positive aspects is God gives grace, as the Bible says, unto the humble. And when we look at this chapter, Abimelech's response is a phenomenal example of humility. It's one of the greatest examples in Genesis. God gives him great grace, God protects him. We see the positive aspects of God's judgment in Genesis chapter 20. Any questions so far? Okay, so now starting Genesis 20, verses 1 and 2. Genesis chapter 20, verses 1 and 2. Do I have a volunteer? Go ahead, Luke. Yuri, sorry. Thank you. So, Abraham's deceitfulness is the same as it has already happened with Pharaoh down in Egypt about 10 years ago. Same type of deceitfulness. He tells Abimelech, she is my sister. And one interesting thing to note here is Sarah at this point is either 89 or 90, and she is still beautiful enough to be greatly desired. I guess the Lord has preserved both her and Abraham. But so Abraham says that she is his sister. Abimelech takes Sarah as wife. This goes farther than it went in the case of Pharaoh. Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. He's taking Sarah as a wife. And now God is going to intervene to keep very serious consequences from happening. God always fulfills his promises, and there's definitely a potential of a lot of different things happening here that would be against the working of God and would directly harm Abraham and Sarah. And God intervenes. Abraham didn't learn his lesson from before. God is still going to protect him. Any questions about verses 1 and 2? So then we have verses 3 through 7. A volunteer to read verses 3 through 7. Go ahead, Luke. So we have here, so God immediately visits Abimelech in a dream, and he recognizes immediately it is the Lord. And we see with his response to the Lord, he probably, that is Abimelech, worshiped the Lord as well as worshiping their own idols. The Bible mentions the iniquity of the Amorites not being complete. He would be an Amorite. With that, it seems that he is doing much better than the Canaanites. And his example here, I'm thinking, there are very few, like when I think of the wicked kings around Israel, so on and so forth, throughout the entire history of the country, there are very few who would ever respond this way in any situation. But anyway, God tells him first the exact truth. You are a dead man. The word actually is literally, you are a son of death. For the woman which thou hast taken, she is the man's wife. So, look, you've taken her to marry. She's already married, and you deserve to die. And we have the next verse. Abimelech hadn't come near her. Nothing had happened. And he said, responding, great humility. He's not like, Lord, I didn't know. No, Lord, this was Abraham's fault. Nothing. He's not trying to blame shift. He asked God the question, basically saying, look, I trust your judgment. Are you going to slay a righteous nation? And so asks him the rhetorical question, will thou slay also a righteous nation? The answer to that is no. He's trusting in God's righteousness. He knows God wouldn't slay, in this case, those acting righteously. And then he gives a response. He had every right to believe that Sarah was available to marry, said he, that's Abraham. It's like, look, Abraham said unto me, she is my sister, and she, now talking about Sarah, even she herself said, he is my brother. So both Abraham and Sarah lied in this case, and he was acting, in his mind, completely righteously to take her as a wife, but didn't know the case that God now revealed to him. And so then he says, in the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done it. Integrity basically means there's nothing crooked in his heart. He had no ulterior motives. He was not trying to twist things. He was not trying to commit sin. Innocency of his hands. It's like, look, my hands are clean. As far as I knew, she was available to marry. So, any questions about that part before we continue to verses 6 and 7? Yes?
I was floored when it said sister, which is actually was true, because with mom and dad, whichever side, I can't remember.
Yeah, we're going to get to that towards the end of this chapter with Abraham's response. That is a good point. So, any other points from these verses? Deb, go ahead.
I just always think it's interesting that in the land of Canaan, there was Abimelech and there was, the priest of the Most High God,
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek. So there was some, again, and obviously those men, both in positions of honor, would have an influence on others. It was probably great, I would think.
Absolutely, and we'll see that later in this passage with regard to his own nation. But so he basically says, look, I didn't have any motivation to commit wrong here. He doesn't even deny what God has said. In fact, later he'll say to Abraham, why did you bring so great a sin upon me? He knew what he did was wrong, even though he wasn't doing it in innocence. He knew what he did was wrong. He doesn't try to deal with that at all. He just says, look, Lord, my heart was not crooked and my hands were clean. I was not trying to do anything wrong here. And God responds the same way. And God said unto him in a dream in verse 6, yea, I know thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I not thee to touch her. So one of the reasons nothing has happened is God also protected Abimelech from sinning any further. God protected this from going further, and part of that is God stops it now. And so God said, look, I know what you're saying is true, and I stopped you from sinning further, and part of that is I withheld you from, as the Bible says here, suffered I not thee to touch her. So we have here God kept him from doing more evil he would be accountable for. God kept him from greater judgment. And now God gives him direct instruction in verse 7, saying, "Now therefore restore the man his wife, give Sarah back, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine." So God gives him one command: restore the man his wife. And then he says, look, he's a prophet. Self-explanatory, although I believe this is the first time the word prophet is mentioned in the Bible. A prophet and the idea of speaking for God. And it's like, look, when you restore his wife, he'll pray for you and you will live. And if you basically make any other choice, know that you will die in everything you have. God is being very, very serious here with the ultimatum. It goes back to verse 3, "Behold, thou art but a dead man." That's what his sin deserves. God is saying, look, so if you restore his wife, he will pray for you, the idea of intercede for you. He will intercede for you and you will live. But if not, like, I'll bring the guilt of this sin upon you, and you and all that are yours will die. So, God tells him very strictly, although he was trying to do this in innocence. I think of one of the famous quotes of Dr. Berg: "Ignorance is not an excuse." When we are doing wrong and we are ignorant, we are less guilty than if we're doing wrong and we know exactly what we're doing, but we're still fully responsible for sins we commit in ignorance. And that's what's happening here. So, after God gives him this command and this ultimatum, we're going to look at his response next. But are there any questions here?
I mean, the phraseology is interesting. I don't want to read too much into it, but it does seem as though he was truly thinking of marrying her. You know, that had come, definitely, as you said earlier, that he went out took Sarah. So there is definitely there. And so here's a man who's working in innocence, purity of heart. God keeps him from sinning, but then also says, now, you have a choice. Okay?
Yeah.
Are you going to follow me, or are you going to not follow me? And so it does seem like there may have been a desire of his heart. Hey, well, I'm just doing this innocently, and like you said, it's still guilty if you're gonna follow through with that evil thought. So I thought the whole thing is very interesting. Of the man has the desire to do something out of innocence, and yet, like you said, it was still something that was wrong. And so God dealt with that desire in a sense, and says, hey, if you follow through with this, you are going to be a real dead man.
Yes. That is a very good point, because God starts with that you are a dead man. He finishes with, if you don't restore her, you and all that are yours will die. God is making it very clear how serious this was, even though Abimelech was innocent with regard to his heart. So, what does Abimelech do? First, it says, therefore he rose early in the morning. He's not going to put this off. He's not going to delay. He's not going to stall. He's not going to make things harder than they already are. Gets up early in the morning, calls all his servants. The name Abimelech basically means something like my father is king, or fatherly king, something of that sort. He is definitely the king of Gerar. And so he calls all the people, and he's going to tell them what has happened. And he says, and he told all these things in their ears, and men were so afraid. So he tells, look, I wasn't trying to do anything wrong. Even when God came to me in a dream, that's true. But God's told me this, that if I don't restore his wife, you and all that are yours are dying. And we see from the end of the passage that God has judged the entire village for this. So presumably, the rest immediately catch the hint that if he doesn't restore Sarah, all of us will die too. So the men there, obviously hearing that God is, I'll say this, I'm not going to use the word angry, this stern, this sharp with them, that they're extremely afraid, which shows also that they have a fear, they have a respect for God. When God says something, they're like, oh no, it's just an idle threat. They're all taking this as extremely serious. So what happens here After Abimelech tells all the people this, and his people are scared, he's then going to directly rebuke Abraham. And that's another example of how he's dealing with this in a way that even under New Testament standards is God honoring. He calls Abraham out to rebuke him, and he's not going to do anything further. So we have verse 9. He says unto them, "What hast thou done unto us, and what have I offended thee?" When you see the word offended in the King James, often it has two definitions. It has the definition we think of hurt somebody else, and also has the definition of cause to fall. Here it's translated for the word cause to fall. It's like, how have I caused you to fall? Like, in other words, what's my responsibility here? Did I cause you to set me up for this sin? So, what hast thou done unto us? What have I offended thee? How have I caused you to fall? That thou hast brought on me and my kingdom a great sin. And then, to make the rebuke even clearer, thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And we also see, once again, in King Abimelech, he is wise. Right after confronting him, he's going to ask Abraham for his side of the story. He's not just going to rebuke Abraham nonstop. In verse 10, he gives Abraham an opportunity to respond. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, "What sawest thou that thou hast done this thing?" After confronting Abraham, after mentioning, "Look, you've brought upon me and on my kingdom this sin. It shouldn't have been done." He then says, "So why did you do it?" I was thinking, that's a biblical pattern for rebuke, even with my students. Look, you did this, it affected this, it should not have been done, why did you do it? That pattern of rebuke, but definitely Abimelech is acting in wisdom here. Any questions about these verses? Any comments about them? So we will go on to verses 11 through 13 then. Verses 11 through 13. Do I have another volunteer to read them? Go ahead, Obi. So, Abraham answers Abimelech. It seems very clear as well. Abraham is answering him very honestly, that Abraham respects Abimelech as well. So we see Abraham's motivation here. First he says, I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place. Like I thought, they're not concerned. They don't respect God. They don't take God seriously. And we see from what happened here that that was not true. They do take God seriously. But he's thinking that wasn't true. And he's thinking also, they will slay me for my wife's sake. Now, the more I think about this, the more I realize how absurd this was. We know from a couple chapters ago, Abraham has over 380 trained servants that can fight. He has basically, maybe not the biggest military presence, but he has an entourage that is well capable of defending him, who would try to go against him. Even on the human perspective, nothing, and the Lord has also promised to protect him and defend him as well. This is completely irrational here. And then, so we have in verse 11, Abraham misjudged, thinking that they don't fear God. He has completely irrational fear, thinking they're going to kill him because of Sarah, and that, like even from the human perspective, that wouldn't happen. And we have the next verse, and I did tell you the truth. It's like, no, in lying to you, I was really telling you the truth. It was an absolute lie. Just because the lie has truth in it, or just because every word of a lie is true, a lie is causing somebody to believe something that is not true. So if you say something in a way that causes someone else to believe something that is not true, you lied to them, even if every single word was true. And here, that is one of these cases. Every word they said to Abimelech was true, but they were directly lying to him. So, we find out here that Sarah is the half-sister of Abraham, which is also mentioned in a couple other places of the Bible. Same father, different mothers, because Abraham's father had multiple wives, and Abraham married Sarah. Realize, before the time of Exodus and the giving of the law, nobody thought anything about marrying close relatives. The reasons for that, one is there's no problems genetically. Nowadays, huge problems, lots and lots of consequences for trying this. Back then, there were basically no serious genetic problems. You were not going to run into difficulties there. Before the flood, when there were much fewer people, and then right after the flood, when there were much fewer people, people married close relatives by necessity. Every person who was alive in those times was a close relative. If you lived in an area with not many people, not many families, it's also pretty much understood that you were going to marry a close relative. God finally forbids it in Exodus, at which point you have some genetic problems already, and also it's for the problem of inheritance. I'm not going to go further into that, but a lot of the political problems in Arabic countries stem from this. They deliberately marry close relatives to keep wealth in the family, and it causes huge amounts of divisions and huge amounts of problems in the countries politically. But realize at this point, there is nothing wrong with marrying a close relative. God forbids it in Exodus, at which point God's saying, look, you have the responsibility to marry a person who's not a close relative, and to marry a close relative is sin. But as of this point, not only was Abraham not doing wrong for doing that, it would have been normal. Any questions here? So, we have here, so Abraham says, look, okay, I lied because I misjudged that, thinking you didn't fear God when you actually do. I was scared for my own life, and I told you the truth anyway. And then we have verse 13. He explains the full story. And it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, so he felt safe while he was back with Terah and the rest of his family back with Terah in Haran. He felt safe back then, but when he was leaving, he said unto her, this is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, he is my brother. So all the way back then, like 30 years ago now, Abraham was scared for his life when he was leaving his family and said, look, so everywhere you go, just so people don't kill me, tell other people that Abraham's my brother. That this was premeditated. It's been going on for 30 years. The two examples we see in the Bible are the two times where it really came back to hurt Abraham and others. Probably, why did it not come up again? Probably nobody else felt strong enough or great enough to, I'll say, compete for the hand of Sarah. Because Abraham is, as other people call him, a great prince. He's very powerful, he's very rich, and it seems the only reason this has only come up twice is because it's only kings that felt they could compete for her hand. So, any questions about that part? This has been going on for 30 years. Now, as far as we know, this is the time it stops, and Abraham realizes this is sin. It doesn't come up again the rest of the book. So, let's go to how Abimelech shows righteousness to Abraham. Pharaoh basically exiled Abraham out of necessity and was very angry with him, although he did, in fact, basically let all of his gifts that he'd already given stand. But Pharaoh was very angry with Abraham. We see a different response here, although I cannot imagine Abimelech not being angry with Abraham. But we see a very different response here. Do we have a volunteer to read verses 14 through 16? Go ahead, yes.
And Amalek took sheep, oxen, and men servants, and women servants, gave them unto Abraham, restored him Sarah's wife. And Amalek said, behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleases thee. And to Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes, and to all that are with thee, with all other. Thus she was reproved.
So, we have not only does Abimelech, as he was commanded, restore Sarah, he gives Abraham great gifts, servants and livestock. And not only that, he says, behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. He doesn't exile. It's like, I don't want to even see your face again. You've dealt with me this way. He said, look, you can choose anywhere in my land and live there. And then, not only does he do that, we have verse 16. This is how he rebukes Sarah. Unto Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. The two possibilities are this was the dowry back when he tried to marry her, or this is right now he's giving this as an indication that he was completely righteous in this. But 1,000 pieces of silver, that's not a cheap amount. We see when Abraham buys a tomb for Sarah later, it's worth in the low hundreds of pieces of silver. So this is like 5 or 6 farms worth of money, 5 or 6 nice farms worth of money that he gives to Abraham as returning. And then we have that next phrase, behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes. The difficulty here is this is a metaphor, a figure of speech in Hebrew that is translated literally in the English. And whenever you translate metaphors literally, they have a tendency to not make sense. Like, for instance, if you translated raining cats and dogs literally into most other languages in the world, it makes no sense at all. Because a metaphor is figure of speech, word picture. We know raining cats and dogs means it's raining very hard. But if you translate that into a language where that doesn't exist, you get something like this, where, what does it mean? He is to thee a covering of the eyes? The idea of the metaphor is that I'm vindicating Sarah. I'm saying I was righteous, and I'm saying that she was righteous, and nothing happened in this case. There was no sin in the sense of anything going further, saying, look, the 1,000 pieces of silver is showing this, and I'm declaring to all people publicly that there is nothing further, nothing inappropriate went on here. And that's why he says, he is to thee a covering of the eyes and to all that are with thee and with all others. I'm saying I'm declaring this to everyone here, and I'm declaring this to everybody else, that there was nothing inappropriate here, and that Sarah is vindicated here. And then the verse ends, thus she was reproved. That it's very clear he intended this as a rebuke, and she took it as one. Like, look, the reason that nothing inappropriate happened here is because God told me this, and because I did right, not because you did right. That's the idea. He is saying, it's on my side. It's because of what I did that nothing inappropriate happened here. And any questions about those verses? Like I said, about the best possible response you can dream of in this situation, both in Abimelech taking God seriously and continuing his righteous behavior, and the way he treats Abraham here. There are probably very, very, very few people that would take this course of action in these circumstances. He chose to.
When you say it was the word covering of the eyes was to more or less say that he was righteous, that Abimelech was righteous?
Eh?
So the he there, would that refer to himself, or is that referring to Abraham?
It's referring to Abraham, and it's referring to the idea that, look, you're guiltless before Abraham, I'm guiltless before Abraham, and it's because of my righteousness and how I acted, not because of how you acted. So, very good question. That brings us to verses 17 and 18. I'll volunteer to read the last 2 verses. Go ahead, Pastor.
So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
So we see here another biblical example of intercession, where God had told Abimelech, look, he's a prophet, he will pray unto you and you will live. And Abraham does that. He intercedes for Abimelech, and God heals Abimelech and all of the ladies in the city, because it says in the last verse, the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. That is, he stopped all the ladies from bearing children, which implies that this has gone on for more than a short time, which makes sense. You don't ask somebody to marry you on the very first time you see them, in the vast majority of cases. It implies that things have happened for a while, and God has kept Abimelech's and the other people in the cities kept their wives from bearing children for whatever period of time because of how Sarah was being treated. So, with that, Abraham intercedes, God heals the people, and brings us to the end of the chapter. This chapter is a very, very strong example in the Bible. First, this chapter is one of the refutations to the argument you hear from extreme skeptics that, look, God didn't care about these Canaanites at all, and he's just a vengeful murderer who's only interested in his people Israel. That is not true. God both mentions he judges the Canaanites and others for their evil, and in this case, when a nation that is in the promised land is acting righteously, God protects them as well. The judge of all the earth will do right. This chapter is the refutation to that argument from the skeptics. It is God treating the Amorite nation in the land of Canaan with, basically, he deals with them according to their righteousness. As I mentioned at the very start, God gives grace to the humble. We see Abimelech's humility throughout this whole part. He's not trying to make himself look right and everybody else look bad. He's not trying to stand up for himself against anybody else. He's showing humility here. And we also see in this part, God working evil for good. This is one of the clearest examples in Genesis of God working evil for good, both making sure that nothing happens between Sarah and Abimelech, also making sure that Abraham is protected. And it seems the relationship here affects the Abimelech that Isaac will deal with later in the book, which seems to be the son of this Abimelech, but there's no exact certainty there. But they have a great interaction as well, and it's very peaceful. It seems to be because of this. How does God do that? God intervened. God intervened to Abimelech, and Abimelech acted righteously. And so this situation turns out, I'd say, far better than it had any right to, because of God working in it. And we see the positive aspect of God's judgment very strongly. That God, he stands for righteousness and he stands against evil. That's what God's righteousness means. He stands always for right and he stands always against wrong. That's what his righteousness means in his actions, in his character. And this chapter shows he stands for right. The previous chapter, his judgment on Sodom, shows he stands against evil, the other half of righteousness. This chapter says and shows very strongly God stands for righteousness. Any questions there? So I would say this is one of the strongest chapters in the Bible strongest chapters in Genesis on the actual character of God. Like, there are lots of messages you could preach here. God's character is so strongly shown, both in his concern for any people, in his righteousness, in how he acts and how he turns the situation to good, and in how even the need for an intercessor. We even see that here, with the perfect intercessor being Jesus Christ. But we see that already back in this chapter of Genesis. So, if there are no more, go ahead.
It just is interesting to me that, where the wombs were closed up. So like you said, there was a sense of time, which human anatomy, a month at least, that all of that time, I wonder if the Lord was saying, I'm the one that's kept you away from her. Maybe there was just some odd things that are happening. All of a sudden he gets a responsibility laid, something's happening. Doesn't tell us there was an invasion, but maybe he had to go out for a week. There's all these things, and because if a king is, I want her with me.
Yes.
He just orders it, and it's so. And so there had to be some things come up, maybe sickness, whatever.
Yep.
You know, I mean, so all sorts of things that, and again, I'm reading into it, but the fact is that there was a time frame, like you said, that God says, I'm the one that kept you from her. You know, I know that you're innocent.
Yes.
And so that's a blessing to know that when you are doing things out of the purity of your heart and wanting to do right, that God will allow it to take place.
Yeah, and that's one of as I think about it, it's taught a huge amount of times in the Bible, because there is no man who is righteous before God. There is no one who can say, I've made my heart clean and am pure from my sin. Every person's actions are affected by their own weakness. One of the greatest examples of that is just how different Christ's character and actions are from everybody else. But God still works for good. I think of David. The Lord hath rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands, he has recompensed me. And David saying that at the end of his life, after 3 major series of sin for different reasons, but God still rewards for righteousness. With that, let's close in prayer. Lord, thank you for your graciousness, your goodness, and your righteousness that are shown in this story. We even thank you for the example of you taking all circumstances and working them according to your will. We pray that we would trust you, that we would draw closer to you, that we would seek to make sure our hearts are fully righteous before you. We pray that you would receive the glory both from this message, from how you've worked in each of our hearts, and from the remainder of the service to come. In Jesus' name, amen.